I've always been interested in how things work, so this is just a brief interlude into how the point motors work on Hornby Dublo electrified points. For those of you who did physics or general science at school, you may well have made something like this. You need a number of items to do it. First of all, you need some copper wire. I mean, it can be insulated, but I've used this. It's just quite thin gauge copper. And the other thing you need for it is a soft iron nail. There we have one there. You need a power supply. I've just got a fairly standard C-type battery, knocks out 1.5 volts. Just put that to one side. So what you do with your copper wire is you take your nail and you get your copper wire, you leave a tail there, and then you just start to roll it round and round and round. So here's the magnet, there's the nail covered in copper wire. I've got one tail of the wire going to the base of the battery, and I've got one tail free which I'll connect to the other terminal on the battery to put the power through and magnetise the nail. So what we've got here is we've got the battery, which is fixed with a piece of blue tack to the cork base here, and I've also got the wire tail from the copper that's wrapped around the nail going to the base of the battery, and that's fixed there again with the blue tack. I've got a free copper wire tail here, and I'm going to touch that to the top terminal on the battery, and then that should push current through the copper winding here, and that should then create the electromagnet, and the nail will then be magnetised and should, in theory, be able to pick up some of these tiny little screws. So I think you can see the magnet's actually working. What I've done here is I've attached the tails of the copper on the electromagnet to a power supply that is far stronger than one of these, and the additional voltage in the supply to the electromagnet makes the electromagnet more powerful than it was when it was supplied by the 1.5 volt battery. So that's just trying to get a lift on those. There we go. That's electromagnetism. Here's the Hornby Dublo 2-rail electrically operated point. If I take that away, you can see what's inside. Here's the lever for changing the points, set in the straight ahead position. So if I just move that forward, you can see they've moved across to send the loco into the siding or the loop or whatever's been designed for it. So we'll put it back to the straight ahead position. There we go. So how does that actually move when we don't use our hand on it, but we use the electrically operated mechanism? If we look closely at the point, we'll see that there are two electromagnets. One's here and one's here. They're both independently powered, so that if you're using your switch to change the point settings, it will just give a quick burst of power to one or the other of the electromagnets, depending on which way you want to send your train. Now, the magnetism that's created in each of these is used to move the lever. Now if I take the lever out, you'll see there's quite a solid piece of iron here which is pulled that way or that way. There, I've put the switch back in. The build on these points is fascinating. You've got some very, very finely moulded plastic detail. You've got the terminals at each end. This end is for the supply to the solenoid motor that moves the points backwards and forwards. And you've got this beautifully designed mechanism where you've got some spring steel, which when that switch moves helps locate the point blades, either turning the train or keeping the train in a straight ahead position. And then you've got this mechanism here that means that everything moves smoothly backwards and forwards. To actually make the mechanism work, you need a burst of electricity that magnetises that end if it's set in one position, or magnetises that end if it's set in the other position. The switch itself that operates these has to be of a special type. It's known as a passing contact switch because you only need a short burst of current to actually move the solenoid motor. So let's have a look at these in action. In use, this whole unit is enclosed in some very fine tin, and this piece here goes over there. There's a gap that allows the switch to move. To actually remove these pieces, you have to straighten the little tabs. You can see the tabs here, here, here and here. The motor itself has quite a lot of protection. There's a nice piece of steel here that sits on top and encloses it completely. And then on top of that you have another piece of tin, again with tabs here, here and here, and that piece sits over there. I shan't push it all the way through because it means removing everything, and that piece sits on there. There'll be a short burst of electricity that actually goes into either that end or that end. These are both separated, so they're not joined up, because you only want magnetism at one of the ends at a time, because when the magnetism occurs it draws the steel bar that you saw on the switch either to this end or to that end. So if we want to move the switch to change the point to the straight ahead position, we need to send electricity to this electromagnet, which will then draw the metal bar that you saw attached to this switch backwards, because the magnetism is pulling it that way. So let's see that in operation. And again, if we want to change the point blades to send the train down into the siding, we'll need to magnetise this end, so the switch is drawn that way. Let's see that in operation. What you have to be careful of with all point motors that are designed like this is that you don't burn out these coils, and to prevent that happening, the switch that's designed for points that are motorised is different to other switches. So you need what's called a passing contact switch, because you only need a short burst of electric. You don't need it on continuously, otherwise these will actually start to burn out. If you want your point motor to have a really good powerful shot of electricity, then what a lot of people do is use one of these. It's something called a capacitor discharge unit. Now I know you can buy some transformers that actually have these built in, but the advantage of these is that they actually store power in something called capacitors, which are like tiny little batteries, I suppose is the best way of describing them, so that each time you move your switch to operate your points, there's a good powerful surge that gets that piece of metal magnetised and shifted to the right position. Dublo actually brought out two types of electric point, and looking inside this one, which is called the simplex point, is another example of the electromagnet in operation. As you can see, it's a slightly different lever design to the one in the original point they produced when two-rail track was first introduced. The way this one was designed, this is the simplex point mechanism, is by using a simple linkage, far simpler than the one in that original point that was brought out for the two-rail track. And you've basically got your piece of iron running down here, and at each end you can see there's a piece of yellow tape, and at this end there's a little hole drilled through, and there's a linkage, a small piece of wire that goes from the bar underneath the track and links up to the point blades. So when that iron bar moves either that way or that way, then the linkage will move the point rails. So you can see I'm moving the point rails, and you can see that the iron bar is moving. Now to move that iron bar, if we look here, you'll see we've got the solenoid motor. So we've got the windings here, the copper windings here. We've got the bar running along here. We've got the linkage from the bar to the point rails, and we've got the pieces here at the end of the electromagnet which become magnetised. So you can see they're pretty clear, one here and one here. And when that end gets magnetised, it draws that side of the bar towards it, and likewise when that end gets magnetised, it draws this end of the bar, and that is what actually turns the point rails in one direction or another. The motor in the simplex point is covered with a metal shield at the base. Slightly different terminal connections. These are very easy to operate. You just unscrew the fixings and you just slide the wire in. There's a little groove here that the wire slides through, and it wraps itself around the threaded post on the screw. To actually hold the blades tight against the rail there, you've got a nice piece of sprung steel running along here. So whichever way that was moved, there would be closure that would be firm and would ensure that the metal faces were joined and a good electrical connection was made. That was done through these little, I don't know if you can see that, but if you just look there where my thumb is pointing, there's a little tab on the base of this point blade which actually goes underneath the rail here. And if we look at the other side, you'll see there's a tab where my finger's pointing. I'll just bring it into the light just there, and that goes under the rail, and that ensures the electrical continuity. The simplex point has similar tabs in place. The simplex point has a circular spring which the pencil is pointing to, and this helps keep the point blades close to the running rails.